So today is the thoughts that running through my mind today is there are two issues that I'm involved with at the moment. Just to say that this is not my normal stage of my life at all. I'm not involved in the issues around separation and parenting and father's issues, etc. But in some way, sort of serendipitously, or serendipity might be seen as a good thing, so I can't say it's a good thing, but they've come across my path. They're two different situations. So I'll address one first, and again, in terms of me recording this, I'm trying to ensure that I stick with the universality of what's involved rather than identifying any particular individual, whether they're the mothers or the fathers or the children or the various people who are involved in them, whether they be solicitors or any people, social welfare people, social workers, whatever. Because I think the issues that the experiences throw up are universal. I don't think they're unique to these particular characters. So I suppose it's important that Dublin, maybe the large cities, maybe Dublin, Cork, Limerick, maybe Waterford, is different than, say, a town of 20,000, 25,000 people. And then that's kind of different from living in very rural areas. They're sociologically different, practically different, so maybe the experiences that apply in one place aren't exactly the same for other geographical reasons. It's interesting just to see how the wind is affected by, the wind is blowing generally in this direction, so I don't know what this will work. So let's choose two characters, a man, a woman. Let me say they're in their early 30s. The woman lives in Dublin City, and again, there's no intentionality of trying to identify the person, but it's important because of the way things work out. So let's say the woman lives in Dublin and the man lives, let's say Longford. I'll throw Longford in there, maybe an hour and a half's drive from Dublin. I don't know if Longford is an hour and a half's drive from Dublin, but that sort of distance. Let's say an hour and a half drive. So these two people get together and they have some sort of a relationship. Again, I don't think the length of time is overly important, but they have, it's not a long-term relationship, they're not married. They have twins. Again, is it important? Yeah, okay, they are twin girls. The dynamics might be different if they were twin boys. And the parents don't continue to live together. So maybe they're together for a short while after the birth of the children, but so let's say it's less than a year. They part for less than a year. So the relevance of that is, as I understand it now, under the law since 2016, if a father is living with the mother of their child for a continuous period of 12 months, and I think that's probably after the birth of the child, then that father will be regarded in law as a guardian of the child. It will be like an automatic thing. Whereas, for example, a woman is by definition a guardian of her child. There's no qualification process required for a woman. There is for a man. If you're a married man and a married father, you're regarded as an automatic guardian. So there's the distinction between an unmarried father and a married father. Guardianship under the Constitution gives you both the accountability, responsibility, and the right to look after your children's social, physical, moral, and educational welfare. There's a sort of four sectors: social, physical, moral, and educational. And in the article, I think it's probably 41.2, don't hold me on that, it talks about, in Irish it says, Rohín an stát gan Curristácar ceartan a dohánta de tústi. and that means it reads slightly different in the English version, but what it means is the state guarantees not to interfere with the imprescriptible rights of guardians to look after the moral, physical, educational, and religious welfare or raising of their children. So in terms of the intentionality of the 1937 Constitution, that was a recognition by society of the central value and importance of guardians, parents as guardians of their children, compared to the idea perhaps that we would have grown up with Eastern states where the state basically took over and superimposed its view on parenthood. So it put parenthood and guardianship at the centre of the spectrum of childcare, and the recognition was that only in the event that guardians had demonstrably shown that they had failed in that regard to carry out their duty, that the state would not interfere with them. So that gave parents, like my parents, enormous power and respect in terms of how they would have chosen to raise us as children. Let's say we were raised speaking Irish at home, we were given certain values. Other people were raised given different values. So we weren't all treated equally, but there was a recognition that our parents were the best positioned people to make those decisions for us while we were young. And that's really different than, say, having a government-controlled, superimposed specification for the raising of children. So if you look at where in Ireland this body, TUSLA it's called, I'm not really sure how they came about it, what they are, etc., but it just seems that there's millions, if not billions, of taxpayers' money embedded in these people and given enormous control. And they're really in the business of specifying the standards of childcare which some system, decides should be applied to children. So if you go down that route, it's a dramatically different route than the previous route, where parents are respected to do whatever they think is important in terms of raising their children. Now, obviously, there's some crossover there. So there is a requirement, for example, for people to send their children to school. So if guardians don't ensure their kids go to school, the state will step in, and, you know, schools inspectors or attendance inspectors will come in and they will bring pressure to bear, or, well, they should be bringing support first, but let's say, you know, support and pressure, but they'll try and focus the effort in getting the children education. So they're basic standards that also presumably should be standards of medical care, dietary care, etc. But in terms of what the values that are passed on to children by their parents, there's an enormous latitude given by the constitutional recognition of guardianship, that, you know, the state guarantees not to interfere with the imprescriptible rights of guardians to look after and to provide for the social, physical, moral and educational welfare of their children. So it's a very powerful thing to be a guardian of your child. It should be a huge level of responsibility. And in the way we've structured our society, a woman who gives birth is automatically appointed as a guardian of the child. Up to 1987, if a child was born outside of marriage, they were legally termed as a bastard. Since then, people are not bastards. They're not called bastards in law. But on the other hand, the child's protection in terms of getting a guaranteed relationship with both the child's mother and the child's father is still not done. That's not carried out. And for years and years and years, the fact that unmarried fathers had no rights has been a big issue in Ireland. However, the argument would be made that over years there's been a development of that, and since, I say, that period in 2016, it is given out that, you know, suggested that, oh no, fathers have been made equal in that regard, that, they say, a father who is unmarried to mother but lives with the mother for a period of 12 months around and after the child is born will be an automatic guardian. However, there's no record of that, so a man in that situation, a woman can dispute that, and he will have to establish that in court. Now, as I read it, if he can establish that on the balance of probabilities it is accepted that he spent these periods of time cohabiting with the mother of the child, then the judge must give guardianship. They're all very woolly things. But what's not included in that is, in conjunction with those rights conferred upon fathers at the time, was the parallel reality that other people could also be appointed as guardians of the children as well. So, for example, if the mother ends up with a different relationship with another man, he essentially can then be appointed as a guardian of that child. So it seems to me that, you know, maybe she has another man again. It seems to me that potentially you could have lots and lots of people as guardians of a child. The question is, so does that dilute the protection of the child? Does it enhance it? Where's the situation, for example, with testamentary guardianship? So, for example, if someone died, let's say a couple are separated, they're married and they're separated, and the mother dies, the mother can appoint before death a testamentary guardian who would then take over the guardianship in conjunction with the widow or husband. So I think it's a bit of a lie to suggest that in some way fathers were given equitable treatment. It's not true. And that's in the law, but then besides the law, there's the culture. You know, there's what happens in paper, and there's what happens in culture. So that colours this situation. So I'm talking about, there's now two girls, and let's say they're 3 years of age, or 5 years, let's call them 5 years of age, and mother and father are separated, and the mother would appear to, well, firstly, the mother's an automatic guardian, and with that is conferred on her the societal belief that mother knows best, wait till your father gets home. So the presumption, and as rightly, that mothers love their children, that's a correct assumption, but there's no parallel assumption that fathers will equally love their children. So in some way or other, men in some way have to prove this. And a man who's not married in some way is fundamentally in some way considered to be less credibly loving of their children than a man who's married. How do we know that? Because a man who's married has more rights than an unmarried father. So there's real questions about where does all that come from, and also what does it do to the expectations of mothers and fathers when they separate if they're not married. So inevitably I can understand that the mother in such a situation will say, well, society obviously in its methodology and its planning has determined that I'm the one that can be relied on. I'm likely to know best. So when I determine something, the initial or an ab initio belief system is that I know best and I'll do the right thing. And therefore a man, if he has a view which is different than mine, he has to establish that, whereas mine is the established norm. So there's no equity about that at all. So let's say these two people are in a situation that they can't agree in terms of the roles that they'll play. So in a situation, this situation, say the mother has decided that she wishes to dictate the terms at which the father will relate to the children. I'm not sure the detail of the, I mean, because I don't think that's particularly important for me at the moment, but, you know, okay, so let's say there's an external evaluation. There's a thing called a Section 32 report, which can be prepared by some sort of professional childcare people or whatever, child psychologist, psychiatrist, whatever. So this is a report which is carried out supposedly independently and on behalf of the children's best interest. It is then presented to a court. The judge looks at this and says the expert opinion suggests that the mother is like this and the father is like that, and as a result of that I will dictate a custody and access regime going forward. So in this particular situation, a judge has made such an adjudication and has determined that the children would spend certain points of time with the father and would be in the normal sole custody of the mother. To my knowledge, I don't know that the father had sought it to be other than that. I'm not sure. I've no reason to believe the father sought to have sole custody and give the mother access. And again, because of the culture. I mean, imagine if you started from, again, ab initio, saying, well, let's assume that neither the father or the mother would be assumed initially as having would be expected to be any better or worse than the other, and that if we talk about justice being deaf, dumb, and blind around prejudice, we'd say, well, let's look who's putting up the best offer for the care of these children. Then perhaps a father would say, I can make this is a proposal I have, and I think that the children would be better off living with me and having access to the mother or something. That's not the way it works. We start off in a situation of presumption that the mother should be the primary carer, and only then, if there's something wrong with the mother, will we then open the channel of possibility to hearing a proposition from the father. So for example, if a father goes in and says, look, from the outset, I believe that these children have a good relationship with their mother. I think it's very important that these children would have a relationship with their mother, and I have no difficulty with that. I just want to play an equitable role in their lives, say in terms of joint custody. He's already starting from a situation where the prejudice is saying, well, look, we already accept that the mother is a good person. That's not questioned here. The question is, we have no reason to presume that you're a good influence and of value to your children and are necessary in their upbringing. You have to prove it. So they enter the door in two completely different circumstances. So when we hear about racism, for example, we hear black people and white people. A white person walks in the door and they have white male privilege. And then we're being offered the fact is that someone who's not white, who's not male, suffers from a discrimination. And that's been talked around all over the world, and we seem to have an understanding of that. But where it comes to parenting, we have exactly the same thing. We have a female privilege in terms of at the outset. And over my whole involvement since 1988 in discussions around separation in children, I'm telling you, if anything would inflame a response, a reactive response from women generally who are supposedly representing women's issues, the very audacity of someone like me to reduce it down to the thing of even questioning that, you mean that you would even question the fact that a mother is the best thing for the children? But actually, that's not what I was trying to do. What I was trying to say if we start off from saying this is an equal playing pitch, a level playing pitch, that means it's level. That means we walk out on the pitch, it's a 0-all game, and we all have to either be accepted as being perfectly adequate for the job, and therefore only if we fail to achieve the norms should we be discriminated against. Why do we do that? Or else we start off from a situation that says, no, nobody has proven they're good parents here. Pass the test. There's a standard, there's a test. If you're up to that, then we'll give you a run. That's not the situation. We go out into a pitch and it's not level. A pitch is like this. So up here we have place the mother. Now, what do you agree or disagree with me about that? Do you think that's reprehensible that I as a man should say that? That's a different issue. I'm just trying to identify this the reality. The mother stands up there. She's an automatic guardian. The presumption in law is everything she's doing is okay. Down here we have a guy, and he is nothing. He's not even recognised in law as the father. And he has established that. So he has to try and, this is a stone, it's kind of heavy and it wants to go down all the All the time he's fighting to get up here. All the time he's operating under a stress situation. See that, if I look down, what's the slide? It's hard, this is hard work. He has to do all this. Meanwhile, up at the top of the tree, this person's here. Now, the other thing is, there's a whole support structure for this person here. God, look at this. So this person can rest on this structure. So since 1990 in Ireland introduced an unmarried mother's payment. So we don't call that anymore because unmarried mothers then was seen as a derogatory term, so it's called single parent payment. So there's a whole underpinning. So a single mother starts off with, okay, you'll be provided with housing. And housing, because you've got children, means it's not a one-bedroom flat. You have to be provided with adequate housing to enable you to raise 2 children. So you start off with that. The second thing you start off, I don't know how much more I can support this person, but the next thing that you start off, you get the children's allowance. So the children's allowance is only paid to one person. Now this other person here is struggling to get up like this here, if they want to be an Now, an evil playing pitch would look like this, okay? So for example, if there was support, that's a support. It's equally supporting both sets of people. There's none of this. There's none of that there. Now that's not the way it is in Ireland. And so am I bitching about this? Not that I'm bitching, I'm saying, you know, we too often in the last 30 years or so have I listened to the language about feckless fathers and presumptiveness about how fathers don't perform, etc. but we're denying the fact that the spotlight of demanding performance and high levels of performance fathers and the presumption that they're going to fail is really, really high, whereas on the other side, the protection and support for women and the allowance given to women in the fact that if in some way a woman falls or has a problem or struggles, everybody comes on board and says, well, look, she's a woman under pressure, she's on her own looking after the kids. And those things are all true. I'm not questioning those. I'm just saying we don't have the same approach when we're supporting a father that's in a situation. Anyway, I'm going to leave that at the moment, simply because I'm just trialing how this is. And the feedback, I'm just not sure how the camera is wobbling in the wind. I need to have a look at that and see if there's any stabilization. So we'll leave it at that, okay?